I was on a wildfire just south of Dongwei Proving Grounds in Utah. We were in fire rigs driving to the incident area, 4 trucks in a close convoy, when we heard helicopters. 8 black military choppers escorted us in formation for like 10 minutes. We assumed they were just doing drills and using us for fake target practice or something. A little while later, we were parked and about to start hiking to the fire line when suddenly a thin column of smoke shoots probably about 200 feet into the sky. It was a good mile away, but the concussion was pretty significant when it hit us and the noise was still ridiculously loud. We thought it was probably no big deal. We knew we were near a strike zone. A good 5 minutes later, an aircraft like nothing I have ever seen flew by us at maybe 500 feet. It was flat black in some sort of rectangle, but with fins and wells on the underside. It was moving pretty slow and was dead silent, so I have to assume it was some sort of stealth glider. It sounds ridiculous, but it immediately reminded me of a huge flying Batmobile, Tim Burton era. After that, some military personnel got on our radio frequency and instructed us to leave the area immediately. When our crew chief asked who it was and why they signed off, and the incident commander, the guy in charge of managing the entire situation, came on the radios and said we were evacuating the area. They sent us to a completely different fire about 100 miles to the south and never told us why except that it was higher priority, which was not true. It was already out when we got there, and we just assisted crews in the mop-up operation. The thing that confuses me about this is that the Army didn't want us to see it. Or if it was dangerous, why didn't they keep us clear of the area in the first place? Either a communications breakdown, or they had a bad situation going down and had to get us out of there without warning. What I'm about to tell you isn't about me ever seeing a UFO, but what my grandfather swears to be true and had experienced back in the day. This event was also told back to me, the same by other older folk in the same generation as my grandfather. They all swear it to be true, and I also can't come up with a reason to find why they would all lie. Keep in mind my grandfather and the other old folks said that this happened back in the day, say between 1935 to 1945. The reason they're not sure is because they never really paid attention to full calendar dates. Mind you, they lived in villages in northern Iraq, so technology wasn't up to speed at their time and location. Some backstory. During the summers of northern Iraq, all the men in the villages ever did was work for their farmlands, build homes and structures, more farms, and mainly bring food to their family's table. Women did all the chores, cooking at home, making sure to prep their children for school, and having everything packed up and ready for the husband to take to his work. When winter hit, nobody was farming, working, or doing anything outside since the villages were a little more elevated on the mountains. So obviously the snow and cold prevented them from doing the majority of work outside, and most of the villagers would just stay in and live off of what they had gathered in the summer. Also, the winter was an ideal time to get married, and everyone got married in the winter. And so what my grandfather told me starts here. My grandfather was at the reception building and was pretty much enjoying the wedding dinner there. The singer supposedly was taking way too long to come back from relieving himself of what seemed to be a number 2. Mind you, in 1930s northern Iraq, they didn't have the toiletries that we have today. To take a dump, you had to go outside, hike a 5-minute walk towards the waste area, dig a hole, squat, then you had to bury it and walk back to wherever you were. So the singer was gone for about an hour or more, and all the guests were curious and some worried. My grandfather goes outside and finds snow footholes going in one direction. All of the other tracks that he saw were supposedly bi-directional, showing that they had the person trekking to and from wherever they were going. So eventually he finds that the footholes stop and no other tracks were around where he was standing. No squat prints, no waste holes, nothing. He goes back to the wedding, and about half an hour later, the singer walks through the entrance. The groom was pissed and started yelling and asked where the hell he had been. Some women were crying in hysteria thinking he might have slipped or broke something. Everyone is curious, and my grandfather notices that he was a little pale. The singer warms up a bit and tells everyone what he witnessed. This is what he said with a slight adjustment to the language translation. As I said to the other entertainers, I was going to relieve myself outside. I was walking to find a spot when I was suddenly approached from behind by two figures. They asked me, "Do you want to go somewhere far?" I asked them, "What do you mean by far?" The two figures said, "How about China?" They had this floating vehicle above them, hover closer to the ground. They took me by the arm and I walked into it. We suddenly flew very high and very fast. Eventually we got there and I walked down and wandered the countryside for a little bit. I went back to the two figures and said that I wanted to go back. So we did, and they dropped me off and flew away really fast. I walked back and now I'm here. Some people thought the singer drank too much and was speaking crazy. Everyone was relieved that he was safe and back to the party, but pretty much everyone called his recollection fake. But the weird part happens when the singer reveals to the guests. Apparently, the singer had grabbed a flower bunch before heading back to the ship, because no way in hell those flowers could have came from northern Iraq during winter. It was all snow and this plant couldn't have grown anywhere near up in the mountains in that harsh weather. Whether or not you want to believe it is up to you, but my grandfather and the other older guys swear it to be true. All of them saw the flowers, and they weren't fake or anything, real flowers. Ed Ray, West Virginia. One night, few years back, my friend, who was driving, and I were taking his girlfriend home when he decided to take the long way home. As we were driving along this fairly deserted back road, I began to zone out and I stare at this blinking red light off in the distance and casually think to myself, I wonder when they built a cell phone tower all the way out here. When suddenly it blinks and is dramatically closer than it was just a moment earlier. At this point, my friend points it out and stops in the road. It blinks once more and is directly in front and over the top of us. The red light is so bright, it floods the car in a deep scarlet hue. I lean forward so that I can see directly into the light. In that brief moment, I feel a flood of negative emotion. The closest description I can offer is to that of being naked under a giant microscope and having every pore thoroughly examined. I then look away from the light to my friend and ask him to drive. He barely responds, apparently in a similar state. He then snapped out of it and starts driving. As we get a little ways down the road, I notice the red light isn't fading and the interior of the car is still clearly lit by it. I look out the window and to my horror, the light is following us and does so for approximately 1 to 2 miles. The light unexpectedly veers off to the left and comes down to the ground, level in a patch of trees adjacent to the road. My friend stops the car again and continues to stare at it and abruptly declares he is going to get out and look, like he is in some sort of trance. He opens the door and I grab his arm, then tell him if he does, I will get in the driver's seat and leave him, that we have to leave that instant. He looks at me and seems to come to and punches the gas, so hard that the tires lose traction and spin. The light remained stationary as we rode away, but I've never looked at the night sky the same. Edit: the incident occurred after dropping off my buddy's girlfriend, so she wasn't present. In my rush to type the story, I forgot that part.